Hello, and welcome to History of the Present. I'm Brian Daitzman, editor-in-chief of The Intellectualist and host of History of the President, a long-form interview series co-produced with Lincoln Square about the forces that are reshaping our world and the history that brought us to this moment. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Ambassador Bob Rae. Bob has spent decades at the center of Canadian political and diplomatic life. He served as the Premier of Ontario and later as the interim leader of the Liberal Party of Canada after a political career that included service in both Canada's federal parliament and the Ontario legislature. He later worked as a lawyer, mediator, humanitarian envoy, university professor, and had extensive involvement in human rights, refugees, Indigenous affairs, and international diplomacy. From 2020 to 2025, Bob served as Canada's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations. He also served as the president of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. That gives Ambassador Rae an unusually broad vantage point on the questions that we're going to discuss today. He has seen politics as a legislator. He has governed. He has negotiated. He has worked on humanitarian crises. And he has represented Canada inside the international system itself. That perspective is particularly important now. Canada is confronting profound questions about its relationship with the United States, the future of NATO, Russia's threat to European security, China's growing strategic industrial power, and Europe's effort to rebuild its defenses. Ambassador Rae, thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you, Brian. I am technically on vacation, so if I look a little more relaxed than I in previous photographs, that's a good thing. But I'm delighted to talk to you.
Well, that's great, Bob. And if we can, so Bob, what I want to do is I want to put on a video first. Okay, we're going to start with a video, and then I'm going to ask you a question. So let's see this video, and let's go with this.
What do you think the Prime Minister can say to you today to change your mind on tariffing Canada?
Tariffing cars?
Tariffing Canada. Is there anything he could say to you in the course of your meetings with him today that would get you to lift tariffs on Canada?
No.
Why not?
Just the way it is.
What's the first state?
Mr. Ambassador, the President of the United States has repeatedly said, his Secretary of State has also said that Canada wants to be the 51st state. Can you speak to that?
No, I think he wants Canada to be the 51st state. I must say, once he said it, I haven't found anybody in Canada who would like that status at the present time or at any time. I think that's a tone that the president has introduced into the conversation that has really not. I think to say it's unfortunate is just an understatement. It's really poisoned the well as far as the discussions with the United States are concerned. It's making it much more difficult for any political leader to really try to get what looks like a reasonable arrangement on tariffs and trade and maybe other issues as well, when the president is doing what he's doing on Greenland, saying what he's saying about Canada. It's making it much more difficult. I mean, President Trump is enormously unpopular in Canada at the present time, and that makes it very difficult for any Canadian politician to reach an understanding with this administration.
Bob, a lot of our audience is American and might not understand maybe or appreciate how Canadians now view Americans since January 20th, 2025, when President Trump began his second term. Is it possible, Mr. Ambassador, for you to explain to Americans how we are being perceived in the country of Canada?
I don't think it's a perception of the United States. I think it's a perception of Mr. Trump and his administration. I really do think Canadians have been around long enough. We've had this extremely long relationship, sharing basically the northern part of North America, being here we are. You've been our neighbor all this time. We've been involved in each other's business for over 250 years. And we now find ourselves in a position where the President of the United States dismisses any of our economic concerns, says we shouldn't be manufacturing anything, and all we should be doing is shipping our resources south to the United States, and that should be the nature of the deal. And then he says, and if you don't like that, then you can just become the 51st state, which is, I think, to put it mildly, demeaning. It's also not what Canadians want.
Yeah.
We've been proud of our sovereignty for over 150 years, going over many decades of time, through World Wars I and II, and prior to that time for a long time. So there's just no desire to go down the path that the president is setting out for us. But I really think it's important for Americans to know that this is not about how do we feel about Americans, because we've been, impacted by the culture of the United States, by the history, by events, by so many things about the U.S. So there's a very strong feeling, fellow feeling, I would say, about our, as we call them, our American cousins.
Yeah.
But that does not transfer to the president. I mean, he has made it very difficult for, as I said, he's made it very difficult for Canadians to look beyond his bluster and get us to a better place.
Let me ask you, Bob. I mean, I've heard Canadians say that the damage done by the President Donald Trump and his administration is probably going to be permanent or generational. And if you could just speak to what is Trump, what has the President of the United States done, the tariffs, how has that made Canada hurt Canadians? Because I don't know if it's not, basically in the United States, we hear Trump insults Canada, Trump insults Mexico, but we don't necessarily understand the full ramification of what that means. What does that mean if you're a Canadian and Trump is doing these tariffs? What does that mean if you're, you have a family, you're paying for your kid to go to school, you're paying for your, you're worried about the mortgage, all, typical things.
Well, I mean, what he says is bad enough, but it's what he does that's been the most disruptive. And we made a decision together, our two leaders, Prime Minister Mulroney and President Reagan, made a decision that we would establish a free trade area between our two countries. And that took place in the mid-1980s. It was confirmed in 1989. We then went on to an agreement with Mexico in the 90s. And since that time, I think by any objective measure, this is not just, me blabbing, but if you look at the economic growth for both our countries, if you look at employment for both our countries, if you look at general overall prosperity for both our countries, it's been extremely beneficial. That has also led in both Canada and Mexico to a much stronger integration of our economies. So many businesses have been created in our country specifically with the idea that we would share the market and we would come and do what we can. Now, there have been tensions on lumber, for example. American interests have never believed in a completely free trade arrangement with Canada on lumber, and so we haven't had one. We're supposed to have one, but it hasn't actually happened. But in stuff like manufacturing, cars, for example, I mean, the auto industry has been integrated since the 1960s.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to be that we had a Canadian car and you had an American car. GM would set up a branch plant in Canada, and then Ford would set up a branch plant. And so we became we supplied our own market through a much smaller operation. And then we became integrated by all those companies into a North American production scheme where in Ontario and Michigan, we're very close. And, we have stuff going back and forth across the border many times before a final car is produced. There's no such thing as a totally American car.
Right.
It's a North American car, but there's not an American car. So when you disrupt that relationship completely, we call it the rupture. When you disrupt that relationship and you start threatening to put on tariffs, or you actually put on tariffs, and you limit the ability of Canadian companies like in steel and in aluminum, for example, where now we're living with a huge tariff, and the president is saying it's going to go to 50 on the 19th of August. Now, here we are, we're taping the show on the 17th of August. We don't know what's going to happen on the 19th of August. But I think everybody understands that if you have your biggest neighbor threatening to do X, Y, or Z, it chills investment. It chills confidence. It chills people's sense of security about what's coming and what's not coming. We're doing our best to try to get through this time, and we will continue to do that. But the fact that there's such a degree of hostility and such a degree of recklessness about waking up one morning and saying, oh, they were going to put a tariff 50% on this, oh, we make it 100. I mean, this is not a logical, predictable situation. It's not intended to be by the president. He is trying to do everything he can to upset our balance, to put us on the back foot, on the side foot, to make it as hard as possible for us to say, we know that this relationship is stable, it's going to be strong, and we have other relationships we're trying to build. So, when you ask the question about this is going to affect things for all time, I don't know if that's true or not, because it really depends on what happens in the future. If we can get to a point of stability and a point of confidence, then I think things will be restored, but it will be different. And the reason it will be different is because we will never forget the nature of the uncertainty that has been created in our hearts and minds by President Trump. We will never forget that. That will have a permanent impact. Whether we can restore a degree of stability, I certainly hope we can, but it's not going to be easy.
Mr. Ambassador, how do you see you were involved, as we said in the introduction, you were involved in party politics. You understand sort of the nuances, getting elected and all that sort of comes in. From where you are now, how do you see the degradation of the Republican Party, which, I think you think of Eisenhower, right? President Eisenhower, he built the national highway system, right? And today, same party, we have Trump, and you see the same degradation in the House with Speaker Mike Johnson, who is completely abrogated his constitutional responsibilities. And you know this, the American system. I mean, how did this happen that the GOP, at least in your understanding, how do you believe the GOP went down this path of authoritarianism, democratic erosion, and really becoming this party that stands for almost nothing but tax cuts for the very wealthy?
Well, I mean, I think it's been a gradual. I mean, it's like bankruptcy. How does it happen? Gradually, and then very suddenly. I mean, to trace it back in between our two countries, I think the presidency that redefined the nature of the relationship between Canada and the United States was that of Franklin Roosevelt, because he immediately moved off from this smooth Hawley stuff as he was seeing this doesn't make sense. Let's try to normalize these trade relationships as much as he could under the, a difficult congressional situation initially. He also began to remake the security relationship and also the personal relationship between him and the Prime Minister of Canada. He was frequently in touch with and talking to the Prime Minister Mackenzie King. When the war broke out, he gave a couple of very important speeches in Canada talking about the relationship and the importance of Canada's security to the United States. And that's when our security relationship was really joined up. And then, of course, the United States joined the war, and then that led to a much deeper alliance. It then led to forming the United Nations under American leadership, forming NATO under American leadership, forming the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade under American leadership, and rebuilding Europe under American leadership. And let's stress, it wasn't just the Republicans, the Democrats who did this, because Roosevelt's great success was bringing the Republicans into the discussion about why this change was going to be required. And so, of course, you had McCarthy on the right wing of the Republicans. You've had Barry Goldwater subsequently. You've had lots of, conservative populist movements within the Republican Party. But the Republican Party has always had diverse views and has always seen itself as being a party of the center right, and the Democrats as a party of the center left. And one of the consensuses that actually developed was on this issue of the relationship with Canada. How would that work? And this notion of creating a stronger free trade area in which we would be working with each other on acid rain and environmental issues, and the whole gamut of relationships that we've established on managing what is a huge border. We have two major treaties, one on the St. Lawrence River, one on the Columbia River in British Columbia. We have lots of areas of tension sometimes over fishing quotas, between lobster fishermen in New England and in Canada, because frankly, the lobsters are moving north because of the warmer climate. Yeah. And so, said, what are we going to do? Send them home? No, this is the way it is. But we're trying to find ways to solve those kinds of issues in a context of friendship and shared interest and strong interest. And that, I think, is something that is really important for us to maintain as a country. And that, I think, has changed now with the Republicans. I mean, the thing that has surprised me the most is that, frankly, Trump has a lot of willing executioners.
Yeah.
And they are in the Republican Party. And that whole party has gone in another direction. When the free trade agreements were passed and when they were amended, most of the Republican senators, most Republican congressmen supported free trade. They were free traders. And now there's a huge protectionist majority in Congress, both Republicans, frankly, and Democrats. And that's what I think actually the shift from Trump to Biden and then back to Trump was a challenge because the personal relationship between our prime minister and President Biden was very strong. But President Biden was very aware of the protectionist wing in his party. And he was actually very cautious on a lot of the trade issues that were in front of us. And I think there would have been a challenging negotiation with him, but it would not have been like this one. Nothing is like what we've had to deal with in dealing with President Trump and his immediate advisors and administration. We've never seen anything like it.
Mr. Ambassador, you've had experience in matters of mediation, human rights, war and peace. What is your take on the U.S. war in Iran and its secondary, tertiary effects in terms of the economy, the price of gas, and then there's now reporting that the Pacific U.S. naval vessel just went from the Pacific to help with the war in Iran, and there's all this talk about Taiwan, and all of a sudden you have all these sort of things happening where there's reporting about Russia possibly testing the eastern flank of Europe. You have reporting about the president allegedly working with some sort of oil speculator setting up wells on Greenland. And if we can just put up the map for a moment, if we can put up the map, just looking at this, it sure looks like the U.S. is coming from the west, Russia is coming from the east, and squeezing Europe, and China is undermining Europe's ability with its economy. There's been a lot of reporting that it's doing things to basically make it hard for Europe to compete. Do you believe that we're in a time of pre-conflict, Mr. Ambassador?
I think we're in a time of conflict. If you look at your map globally, much of Africa is now in the middle of an extremely painful conflict. The Middle East is an area of dramatic instability, dramatic loss of life and conflict, and we have civil wars in many other countries, including probably right now, most importantly, Myanmar, where hundreds of thousands of people have been killed. So we're not in a nuclear confrontation. We're not in a world war in that sense, but we are living in a time of major conflict in which I think there are some basic rules of the game which should pertain to everybody. The first one, and the most important one, is to be pragmatic and consequential in your thinking. I think the thing that troubles me the most about President Trump is that he is ideological, not pragmatic. He's ideological. You don't know what the ideology is going to be exactly, but he's completely unpredictable, and he's impulsive. So instead of having a pragmatic assessment of, well, we do this to Iran, what will they do to us?
Right.
And what will happen as a result of that? And do we have the wherewithal? Do we have people lined up with us? Do we have our allies with us? When President Bush the first decided that he needed to respond directly to the aggression by Iraq against
Kuwait,
against Kuwait, he made a very careful series of conversations. He had conversations with Europeans, with Canadians, with others. He said, if we respond, and we think we should, because this is a complete breach of the UN Charter of any international norms, will you be with us? And everybody said, yeah, we will. We will line up with you, and we'll be with you. And so the coalition of the willing, as it was called, against Saddam Hussein was very specific. Also, it was not a total victory. It was not intended to be. It was not intended to be. It was intended to say, let's get them the hell out of Kuwait. Let's make them pay for what they did in Kuwait, and let's show what we can do as we're united. And then that's it. There's not going to be any further steps taken. And the contrast between that event and that president and his conduct and President Trump and his conduct is complete.
It's 180 degrees, basically.
There's no comparison between the two. President Trump immediately started complaining as nobody's with me. Well, you didn't ask anybody. And if you had asked, you probably would have been told no, because there's a complete unpredictability about the strategy that's being followed and the tactics that are being used that will come back to haunt you. And I think Americans should be reading one of your great historians, now passed away, unfortunately, Barbara Tuchman, who made a career of writing about what happens when things go wrong. Like when The Pursuit of Folly is one of her famous books about, there are people who decide to do something which actually doesn't make sense. It's not a smart move. It's a mistake.
Yeah.
And I believe very strongly that the invasion of Iran, the assassinations that were carried out, and the invasion is a major mistake. We've gained nothing by eliminating the leadership. Israel has no greater security than it had before. And in fact, what the war has done is exposed the lack of real capacity on the part of the United States to finish the deal.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is
dangerous.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that we have expected of the United States is what you expect from any imperial power, and that is competence. And when you lose competence, you lose confidence. The two things go together. When the incompetence takes over, the global confidence in the imperial power is shaken to its core. And I mean, we look now, today, waking up, you never know what you're going to see. President Trump praising the president of North Korea and
Yeah.
bad-mouthing South Korea. And you say,
how is that? I'm curious.
This is preposterous. It's completely preposterous.
Can you speak to that? Because that, I think, it's again, the information environment is such that people don't hear this. But I know in Asia that must have been a major story. The fact that the president of the United States basically said he personally likes North Korea, the leader of North Korea, thus, and South Korea is not doing what we want. Something with Iran, thus we're going to reward this murderous dictator. It's frankly, if it wasn't, these things are happening daily though, so it's not really unsurprising. I mean, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen? Right now Russia is testing NATO with drones. There are reports. There was reporting, I want to say today and recently about reports about the Russian Federation potentially engaging in a limited invasion of Eastern Europe. And then you have the president calling Vladimir my best friend, my friend, my pal. How does it, Ambassador, how do you think this is going to go?
Well, I think it's going very, very badly. And I think that unless there's some dramatic change in Washington, it will go very much worse. I mean, this is appalling. I mean, let's look at talk about human rights. Let's look at the human rights record of the North Korean government and of that dictatorship. They've starved their people. They've deprived them of information. They've deprived them of any ability to think and breathe and talk. It's probably the most deeply corrupted and also most profoundly oppressive, one of the most oppressive regimes in the world. In South Korea, you have a democratic, lively, very entrepreneurial, remarkable culture, producing films and movies that our kids and us all watch and listen to their music and everything else. And he supports this guy. I mean, he supports Kim. Like, what is he thinking?
Yeah.
But Brian, when I was sitting in my seat at the UN, I was there the day that the United States voted with Russia, North Korea, Belarus, and every other tin pot dictatorship in the world against Ukraine and against us as allies of Ukraine, who said we're going to stay the course. And America said, no, we're getting off the train. And I'll never forget that day as long as I live. To me, it was a day of incredible betrayal. And there's nothing that President Trump can do that will erase the memory or the reality of that move. And our prime minister has referred to what's taking place as a kind of rupture. And I think that's a polite term to describe what's taking place. And I think, frankly, the American people and many Canadians have not fully absorbed what's happening. President Trump is a friend of Vladimir Putin. He is a friend of the dictator of North Korea. And he prefers their company and their advice to that of his allies. It would be like Franklin Roosevelt saying, actually, I like this Hitler guy. I'm on his team. I like Mussolini too. I'm on his team. You have a president of the United States who is supporting the moral equivalent of Hitler and Mussolini against his allies. Now, what does it take for people to say, actually, this represents a terrible change compared to what has happened before? And that, I think, is a real problem.
Unfortunately, yeah. Unfortunately, people don't pay attention, and sometimes people don't pay attention until it's too late, and the consequences are permanent. How is Canada trying to navigate this now? I've seen reporting about Canada integrating more with the European Union in terms of some military. I don't know how developed that is. how is Canada trying its best to deal with this very tough situation with the president in terms of securing its people, its borders, and making sure that it remains competitive in an increasingly might makes right type of world?
Well, I think the way you put it is right. How are we managing? How are we trying to navigate? I think that's exactly the concept that I would use. We don't have all the cards, but we do have some cards.
Yeah.
And we are trying to negotiate some kind of economic and trading and investment relationship with the United States that will be stable and will get us through until the next president, it's whoever that is, and see what they want to do. And at the same time, we are indicating to everybody that we're open for business as a country. And the prime minister set out in his now, I think, very well-known speech in Davos to say that actually middle powers like Canada have the ability to take decisions and to do things with other middle powers. But we all come at it from various points of view. We're not in Europe. We're in North America. We are geographically and physically, in many ways, culturally, we're in America as well as in North America, as well as being obviously influenced by Europe and Asia, whose countries have provided us with huge immigration in the last 30, 40, 50 years. We've become an incredibly diverse country as a result of that whole process. And rather than say what a terrible thing that is, as President Trump has done, we've said, no, actually, we embrace it. We celebrate our diversity. We are who we are now. We're not who we were 50 years ago, and that's okay. We like that. And we want more to celebrate that diversity. And that diversification process is what the Prime Minister is trying to do economically. But we need to do that with a healthy degree of realism in saying, yeah, we want to do that, but we also know that so much of our current relationship is based on our relationship with the United States, and that's something we have to keep uppermost in our minds as we go forward.
Mr. Ambassador, there are reports that that Europeans were preparing to fight Americans because the president was talking about invading Greenland.
Yeah.
What would have happened in that situation with Canada?
Well, we were with the Europeans all the way. I mean, we don't believe that. I mean, our interests are clear. I mean, if we say, well, you can take Greenland, it's sort of like knowing, well, that's just the ice cream at the beginning of the meal. I mean, that's not. That's
basically
not gonna work.
To analogy. That's like
we're next on the menu. I mean, forget that. No. I mean, I don't know anybody who's on board with the president on Greenland except for him.
Yeah.
And who knows what he'll do. But it would have been the end of NATO, because basically for a NATO ally to basically invade or take over another member of NATO is completely wrong. I will say, though, the one thing that Trump has done, the president has managed to unite Europe and unite
right.
NATO in a very profound way. And he's kept, he's been saying for years, we want you to defend yourselves more effectively. And so that's exactly what's going to happen. But hey, guess what? What that also means is we're not going to buy all our products from you. I mean, we are going to diversify where we get our security of various kinds. We'll get some equipment from the US. We'll build more equipment ourselves, and we'll get some equipment which we'll commission in cooperation with the Europeans. I mean, that's the way it's going to be.
And so basically, if the U.S. had invaded, Canada would have been on the side of Europe.
Yes.
Okay. And that would have been a very, I think for Americans, I think that would have been very jarring to see the U.S. obviously just invading Greenland, which is absurd, but then fighting Canadians too. The idea of going to war against Canada, I imagine you've seen Wag the Dog. Some of the, the idea that the Americans would invade Canada is not something that was ever taken seriously. But under this president, who knows?
Well, I don't think this is where I draw the line. I mean, I don't believe that these kind of fantasies that the prime minister, the president has with Greenland and with, I don't think they're thought through. I mean, any more than the Iran thing was thought through.
Yeah.
But Bibi convinced him to do it. I mean, Bibi's been talking about invading Iran, the need to invade Iran for the better part of 25 years. And so every other president, and frankly, many others to whom the prime minister of Israel has talked about this, have said, no, that's not going to happen. And this is the first time that we've had a president say, yeah, this is a good time to do it. Let's go. Let's do it. Mm-hmm. And now you tell me how security has improved in that part of the world. It has not improved in the slightest. And not only has the security not improved, it's going to cost constant flows of cash in order to buy your way out of it. And I think that's how bad it is at the moment.
Mr. Ambassador, you talked about NATO, and the U.S. is the sort of, NATO was set up with the U.S. essentially as a central guarantor. It's a defensive alliance. If, to your point, if the guarantor of the defensive alliance then goes on offense against members of that alliance, or perceived to go on offense, is NATO still is NATO still something that Europeans, traditional U.S. friends and allies can depend on, like in the Baltics, Poland?
Well, we can't depend on this administration. We can't depend on Trump. And not only that, Trump has sent J.D. Vance into ideological battle with Europeans, saying we're going to be supporting all those political parties that are against the current governments, whether it's the ADF in Germany or the nationalist movement in France or the descendants of Mussolini in Italy. That's we're going to keep on with those folks. And you've got to say to yourself, I mean, if you're a democratically elected European leader, I mean, perhaps even you're a social democrat, and Europe has been electing social democrats since the 1900s. So you say to yourself, if this is the way he behaves, and this is the way he thinks, and this is the way his ideologists think, can we rely on this government, this American government, for our security? And the answer is emphatically, no, you can't rely on them any more than we can rely on them. I mean, I've tried to say this in as many ways as I can. We can no longer rely on the United States to be our partner, let alone be our friend. We can't even rely on them to be our business or our security partner. We cannot rely on them. And this is a huge, huge change. And this is a huge problem.
Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned the Americans supporting very right-wing pro-Russia parties in Europe. You mentioned the AfD, which is known for a pro-Moscow approach. You mentioned the I think it's the National Front in France. There's Reform in the United Kingdom, which is of the same sort of pro-Brexit. I don't know if they're publicly pro-Brexit, but a lot of the same characters. And then you also have the president encouraging separatism in Alberta, in Canada. How do the Canadians see Americans undermining Canadian sovereignty to that degree? It would be like Canadians coming to New York or wherever and saying and basically supporting an independence movement. How is this being perceived?
It's not Americans. I keep saying this because when you say how do we feel now, but I think I'm like most Canadians. I don't feel the slightest bit anti-American. I just think all of us, whether we're Canadians or Americans or Brits or Europeans or Chinese or whoever we are, we have to understand this administration is different, and the extent of its difference has gotten worse. Trump 2 versus Trump 1. Trump one was, there were guardrails, there were advisors, there were people in the administration that one could talk to and say, can we not figure our way through this? And the president didn't like any of those people, ultimately fired most of them, but then he was defeated. And we're now back with a new administration in which you don't have any guardrails. You have prompters and apologists and amplifiers. And then you have dutiful lieutenants who will go out and say this about, Justin Trudeau, or they'll go out and say that about some other Canadian leader. And that's how they will behave. And so we're in a new ball game, which is not a nice ball game. It's very difficult because the pitcher on the other side is throwing the ball at our head every single pitch.
Yeah.
That's what he's doing. And so you say, how are we expected to respond to this? We know, for example, that there are forces in the United States that support the president that are contributing to and doing everything they can to fuel separatism in Alberta and separatism in other provinces if it exists. They don't know what they're doing. They're not going to succeed. Canada will stay united because I think as this becomes more and more exposed, this is what is happening, the consequences of that for the reputation of the United States in Canada will be affected, will be hurt. Our government is being very circumspect about all this for reasons that I fully understand, because they don't want to do or say anything that's going to suddenly create a new set of issues with the administration that, again, can't be controlled because there are no guardrails. I guess I'm a little less inhibited because
Right.
I'm not in any administration. I'm quite glad of it, actually, because it does make me freer to say some of the things that I've been saying. But nothing that I've said has not been said by, Scott Bezantu, who met with a bunch of folks from Alberta, the Secretary of the Treasury meeting with people who support the breakup of Canada. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary.
Extreme, yeah.
Just completely out of line with what you would anticipate. But, we have this document, which was published by the Trump administration in December of 2025, which was the national security strategy, where basically, if you lived in the Americas, the line was, you don't count, we're in charge, America's our backyard, do what we say, you have to accept American hegemony. And Europeans saw that the idea of going out and supporting political parties that are aligned with the Trump administration seemed to be, oh, that's okay, that's fine. That's all part of the game. And this is a huge diplomatic shift.
Yeah.
And it's taking all the allies, it's taking them all an incredibly long time to wake up and smell the coffee. And we're continually turning around and saying, can he do that? He said, he can do it and he's doing it. And you've got to wake up and understand this is what is happening. Same with Putin. People are having trouble understanding what Putin did in Ukraine, the cruelty of what he's done, the appalling violence towards children, towards civilians, the destruction of culture, the destruction of whole towns, just murderous campaign by Putin. And people are afraid to say, well, if we really say that about him, then he might do something bad to us. But I mean, this is the worst. And this is the guy who Donald Trump says, he's my friend.
Yeah.
How are we supposed to think about that?
And that was, Bob, that was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you today is, there's so much disinformation out there. If you could just clearly spell out, what is Vladimir Putin? What is he doing in Ukraine? Can you tell us that?
Vladimir Putin has never accepted the breakup of the borders of the Soviet Union. And he's never accepted the notion that Eastern Europe was only to be a buffer for the old Soviet Union. He is a dyed-in-the-wool nationalist who believes in the sacred civilizational mission of the Russian Empire, just the same as czars did in the 19th century, and just the same as Stalin did in the 20th century. He is the successor to the czars and Stalin. And again, don't take my word for it. Read the speeches that Vladimir Putin has given. He does not accept the notion that Ukraine is an independent, sovereign country with its own language and its own culture. He thinks the language is derivative of Russian.
Yeah.
He thinks the culture is simply derivative of Russian. And he thinks this is all a terrible mistake caused entirely by people who he has the nerve to call, quote, Nazis. And I mean, I've heard Lavrov's speeches in the UN. That's the speech I've just given is exactly what he would say. And they are not, you know, if all he wanted to do was to defend the narrow band of Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine, who he said were being discriminated against by the Ukrainians. If that's what he really wanted to do, why did he start the war by invading Kyiv?
Yeah.
I mean, he everybody expected that he would just keep moving on Ukraine's eastern front, but no, he said, "I'm going for broke here because I think we can beat these guys in a week." And how did that work out? I mean, his war in Ukraine has been even more catastrophic than the U.S. attack on Iran, because I mean, he's lost
1.5 million.
1.5 million people. I mean, the level of casualties now coming close to the levels of casualties that we saw in the Second World War.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible what's been allowed to happen.
Let's go back to Canada. Canada, it has people live longer in Canada than the United States. It's just a fact, right? Why do you think, or in general, it seems like Canada in general tends to treat its citizenry better than the United States? And I imagine there could be a lot of reasons for that. Do you have any insights about that, Bob?
I don't know if I have insights. I mean, I think we've been a different country. The Declaration of Independence talks about the people's rights and talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Canadian Constitution, insofar as it talks about anything other than division of powers between provinces and the central government, talks about the importance of peace, order, and good government. And I think the notion of government as not the enemy, but government as a critical partner in the establishment of a civil space for a population. The fact that we evolved from our colonial relationship with the United Kingdom, there were no wars between us. We didn't have, and we had some attempts at rebellion, but we had nothing that had the firepower of the American Revolution. And we know, I mean, now based on the modern histories that are being written about the American Revolution, it was a very bloody affair. It was a very long period of difficult violence and great suffering, as I think Ken Burns demonstrated in his wonderful documentary on the Revolution. Canada didn't go through that, and I think that's led us to have a sense of the need for compromise, the need for better understanding between people, and our course of our politics has taken a different direction. We had a major shift to public health care in the 1960s. And we had a provincial government in Saskatchewan, which is just north of North Dakota, which brought in more public health measures than had ever been seen. And eventually they were adopted by our national government. So there are many reasons why the Canadian story has been a different story than the American story. And I think the way I see it is that, let's pretend there's a two-way mirror between our countries on the border. You look up there and you see yourselves. You look at that mirror and you see, oh, they're just like us. They really should be like us. I mean, we're no different. We're exactly the same. We all do the same things. We enjoy the same sports. That's who we are. Canadians, it's not a mirror. They're looking down at the United States saying, we're really not quite like that. We really are. We really do have some pretty profound differences, which frankly, Donald Trump has helped to highlight. I mean, he's demonstrated it. Say, people say we're not like that, and we don't approve of that. And I think that is something that he's helped us to define ourselves in some very important ways. Now we have to go beyond that to figure out what does that mean, and how do we make this a working proposition for our country? But I think that's been a different course of history between our two countries. That's overlapped in many areas, but I don't think it ever has or ever will completely overlap.
Let me ask you this about being wrong. Okay. I imagine in your life you've been wrong at least once, maybe twice or three times.
My wife is in the next room. So.
Okay, we'll get her opinion. What is it about knowing you're wrong, learning from it, and growing up from it, just as advice in general, because you've lived many lives, Mr. Ambassador. You've been a legislator, you've been a diplomat, you've worked locally, you've worked internationally, so you've seen a lot that maybe a lot of people haven't seen. What have you learned about making mistakes and being wrong?
Well, I mean, at both the personal level and at the political level, I'd say I think we all learn, if we're smart, we all learn from our mistakes. And there's a reason why words like humility, wisdom, repentance, these are words that are deeply part of all of our value systems. Maybe not everybody's, but certainly mine. And if you go back to the Bible, you go back to both the Old Testament and the New Testament, there's an understanding that when you make mistakes, it has consequences, and you have to accept them, and you have to own them. You have to own up to them. And there's a basic moral code that has a logic to it that we don't always observe. Sometimes, when things are going really well for us, we sort of think, oh, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I can pretty well do what I want, and maybe I won't get caught. And then we learn that's not true. And then we learn that, what you do catches up to you. Eventually, in some way, manner, or form. And I think this is true of countries too, because countries that think they have an exceptional mission in life, that think they are, called by God to do something, or that they are part of that sort of way of looking at life, there's not a lot of humility built into that message. Yeah, the message is pretty much, we're better than pretty well everybody else, and that's just the way it is. And I think that I found at the UN, it was interesting. There was always a lot of fellow feeling among countries that were smaller, because you kind of figured that we don't actually pretend that we can control the outcome of the world. And I have a saying that that I used to use at the UN, that imperial habits die really hard. They don't go away easily. I mean, our friends, the Brits and the French, they still have a kind of imperial view of what their culture represents and what their position in the world is. And I think for Canadians, and I think this is one of the reasons why most of your comics are actually Canadian, is that we specialize in our comedy by making fun of ourselves. I don't think I've ever heard President Trump say anything funny at his own expense.
No.
But it's kind of essential in life.
You know,
to be
that,
able to
that
say,
takes
yeah,
humility.
I mean, I guess because I have lived relatively long time, and I have been in politics up and down. I think Canadians know that, I admit to people when I think I've made a mistake, and sometimes they find it strange, and sometimes they find it refreshing. And it does mean that, people will say, well, if you admit that mistake, then people will always think less of you. But frankly, I don't think that's true. I think people respect honesty in the end about, what shouldn't have happened and what did happen and how you try and fix it.
I have two more questions. This has been a really great talk, Bob. What are you? You're not in government anymore. It seems like you've kind of, you're enjoying yourself now. What are you optimistic about for the future? Maybe, in terms of possibly the world, possibly in terms of getting past this very dark era. I mean, what are you optimistic about?
Well, first of all, I mean, don't think I didn't enjoy myself when I was in politics or government, because I did. But I would say that, as I do more teaching now and more sharing of things with a lot of younger people, with students and others, people ask me this question. They say, well, why can you possibly be optimistic? And I say two things. One is, for me, optimism is a working principle, because it's very difficult to be able to find solutions to problems, or to think about how you can impact change and create the possibility of change if you've given up, if you've fallen into the ranks of the pessimists. I think you have to be skeptical sometimes about how difficult things can be and how tough it can be to do things. But I think you always have to have a certain glimmer of where the light might get in all of these challenges. For me, the glimmer is the change of generations, which I think is a good thing, and knowing that, as an elder, like I feel now, as sort of an older person, I can give advice, knowing that it's not always going to be taken seriously, and I can share some of my perspectives, as a bit of a warning sometimes, but also understand that it's a new generation and a generation behind them who are going to be really trying to implement and make change happen. And I've seen in many parts of the world, in refugee camps, in the toughest of environments, meeting with people who are teenagers and really facing tremendous problems, the courage that they have, and frankly, the fundamental optimism that they have about why they're going to keep on trying, why they know that if they give up, things will only get worse. And so if you actually want to make things a little better, you have to try to make them better yourself. And I think the other thing I really fundamentally believe is that those who are, I would say, on the other side of things right now, have really lousy values that I just don't think are sustainable. I don't think they have any real resonance with most people, because they're all about themselves. It's all about a kind of organized,
the greed.
Oh, it's about greed. It's about selfishness. It's about, and it's narcissistic in a terrible way. And ultimately, that doesn't work. It doesn't appeal. And the more you read history and see how change happens, eventually people catch on and just say, this isn't working. This just doesn't work. And I think that will happen to the Trump administration, and I think it will happen to in the next election in the United States, and I think we will see change in the U.S. But more importantly, I think from my point of view, I don't sit around and wait for the United States to save us or save the world again, because I don't think it's going to happen in the same way. I think it's going to be much more broad-based, much more global when it happens.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, it was really an honor to have you. Bob Rae, it was just an honor to have you to talk about all these different issues of national, international significance. People want to get in touch with you. What is the best way if people are interested in? You say you're teaching a course or writing anything. Is there any way people can get in touch with you, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, again, my wife is rolling her eyes right now. It's like, I'm not going to give you my email. It's not that hard to find, but I'm on Facebook. I'm on X. I'm on some of the other media feeds, and can be easily found. And it's not difficult to reach me or reach out to me and engage. And I'm very happy to do so.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for taking this interview and speaking with. It was a really great conversation, and hope to do it again soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been good to join you. I've had a good time. Thank you.